What is up, YouTube? What is up, Jet Nation? Sean back with another episode of the JTS Jet Show. I'm going to do a couple quick videos on some of the position groupings for the draft and the draft prospects. I'm going to basically pick one defensive and one offensive position each episode to talk about. I want to mention my top, say, 5 to 6 players that I like in from that position. That group of prospects, and then kind of give you somebody later in the draft that I would, think is a good prospect to take a flyer on. I've been watching lots and lots of video, films, highlights from a lot of these guys, and I'm definitely not the caliber of an NFL scout, but I have been putting in the time taking a look, and I want to tell you what I think about some of these guys. So today's positions are going to be wide receiver and linebacker. And of course, we're going to start with wide receiver because all Jet fans are clamoring over what we're going to do at wide receiver. We have a huge hole at that number one wide receiver spot, and how are we going to solve that? We need to help Zach Wilson continue his development. So what wide receivers do I like? So I do have Garrett Wilson as my number one wide receiver in the class. I just think he's much more refined than any of the other prospects in the class. He is explosive. He could play outside. He could play inside. He's a phenomenal route runner. Sets up his corners that are covering him really well with double moves and things like that. Quick, fast. He's not as tall as I would like a wide receiver to be, but super explosive and great after the catch as well. So he is my number one guy. I would love to see him on the Jets. My number 2 guy is Jameson Williams. The only question marks I have with him is I need to get somebody that can help impact this offense now to continue Zach Wilson's growth. So I need a guy that can start, pretty much, or not start, but play the beginning of the season and not be out injured. So I don't necessarily think he's the ideal fit for us. However, if he is, the next Tyreek Hill, and Joe Douglas believes that, then I think you got to select him even though he's going to miss some of the season, and you may just have to draft another wide receiver in the second round then. You guys know I'm a big proponent of drafting 2 wide receivers anyway. I think we need the depth. We've seen how all the injuries last year just destroyed our roster and destroyed our team. We need to have really good, solid, deep depth. Next on the list, I have Chris Alave. Again, he does play a little bit similar to this, similar style to Garrett Wilson, but I do believe he is a home run hitter, deep ball, speed, separation. He actually, talking about my top 3 now, I do think he is kind of a little bit of Garrett Wilson and a little bit of Jameson Williams mixed together. I think he can stretch the field vertically a little bit more like Jameson Williams than Garrett Wilson can, but I do think he's a phenomenal route runner, and he's good with the ball in his hands like Garrett Wilson is. So, but I don't think he's got the elite upside that those others you guys have. Moving down my list, I got Draco London as my 4th wide receiver on my particular rankings. And the big reason is just contested catches. His size, the fact that he goes up, wins 50-50 balls, and is such a huge red zone target. He's like a tight end playing wide receiver. So I don't think he's super well-rounded. I don't think he's got the speed or the agility to do a lot, after the catch. Like a bigger guy like Treylon Burks is more of a guy. He's bigger, similar in size, but he can move a lot differently. He's a lot more agile, a lot faster, a lot more quicker in short areas, and he's very explosive with the ball in his hands. Treylon Burks is. But my 5th guy on my list is going to be George Piggins, wide receiver out of Georgia. I've been debating where to put him on this list. I wanted to put him number 3rd. And I've been going back and forth with it many, many times at this point. But coming off the injury, I didn't see enough from him last year, and I think he probably would have been the number one wide receiver taken in this draft if he didn't get injured. I just want, I'm just not 100% sure you're going to get the same guy you got, before the injury right away. And I don't know if, he doesn't, he's a very well-rounded, I think he'd be the perfect number one wide receiver, but he doesn't do one thing perfectly. And that's one thing I do like about Draco London, and why I'm giving Draco London the upper hand in the rankings for this at this particular time, is because Draco London, he may not ever be as good a wide receiver as George Piggins, but he's always going to come down with that 50-50 ball, and he's going to catch a ton of touchdowns. He's going to be great in the red zone. You know that. And you know what you're giving up by selecting him. Whereas George Piggins is a little more well-rounded, and I think he has the potential to be like, I don't know, Julio Jones type number one guy that's big, physical, can stretch the field all at the same time. But I don't think he's like a number one guy in any one category. Like, he's not going to be the biggest 50-50 ball guy in this class. He's not going to be the fastest guy in this class. He's probably not going to be, in the top 4 or 5 fastest wide receivers that can stretch the field. But he's not, bad in any of these areas either. I mean, so I really love George Pickens as well. And then, like a sleeper, I'm going to go with Shakir, out of Boise State, a little bit smaller. Don't know if I consider him a slot. I think he can play slot and outside, but he is a tremendous. So yeah, I love Shakir out of Boise State as a sleeper in the wide receiver group. I think he's a phenomenal route runner. He can play a little bit inside, a little bit outside. He's probably more suited for the slot, but I think his route running is phenomenal, and he gets a lot of separation. And I think he may go a little bit higher than a lot of people think in the draft. So, all right, moving on to the linebackers now. Switching gears. This was a really hard one for me. I think this linebacker group is super deep. I think you got some different skill sets with some of these guys. It definitely comes down to what your need is as a linebacker and what you prefer in your scheme or system. I definitely have Devin Lloyd and Nakobe Dean as my 1 and 1A. They're the top 2 linebackers for me by far in this class. It's not even close. I think Devin Lloyd's a little more athletic, obviously. I think he's a little bit bigger. Nakobe Dean's a little bit smaller. But I gave Nakobe Dean the slight advantage, because I know he has these amazing leadership qualities. And I could see him being a captain within like 2 years on this team. And I know Joe Douglas wants to draft character guys, and I think he'd be the perfect fit for what we need to take over C.J. Mosley's role as the leader of that defense in a year or two. And he would be a great selection for us. I love Chad Muma. He's kind of a little more of an old school 3-down linebacker, really good at filling holes, great at covering guys out of the backfield, very versatile. You saw some other players come out of Wyoming recently that I think are going to change the way people look at prospects coming out of that school, which I think will help him a little bit in his draft stock. Moving down the list, I have in 4th, I have Troy Anderson, and he's been moving up my board. There's a chance I could consider moving him into the number 3 spot ahead of Muma, because his flexibility is just phenomenal. He could play any linebacker position, great at covering running backs out of the backfield. He's got the agility, can fly over the field, all over the field. He's physical. He hits the holes hard, which is something I know would be a really big benefit for us, because that was one thing we lacked a little bit last year. We didn't have enough players playing downhill. We heard Salah talk a lot about that after the season. So, and then I would put my fifth guy as Brian Asamoah, and reason being is I think he's a little bit more of a will linebacker, a little different than some of these other guys. I mean, I know some of these guys, Nakobe Dean can play will, Devin Lloyd can play will, Chad Muma can't, Troy Anderson can. But I would say those guys are better positioned at middle, inside, Mike linebacker, what have you. And I think Asamoah is the only real very highly rated quality outside will linebacker in this class. I think he's way above Brandon Smith, in terms of his development at this point and his traits. So moving down the list kind of to my guy that I'm going to say, I would say like a lower round prospect that I'm kind of pretty high on. And you guys are going to know this name. He plays for Rutgers. And it's Foley Fatukasi's brother, Alakunle Fatukasi. He's a linebacker out of Rutgers. I've seen him play a little bit since I'm from Jersey, right in the New Brunswick area, so I've watched him play before. He is 6'2", 240. He might even go undrafted, so you can snatch him up later as an extra linebacker depth piece for training camp and see if he could develop into something. But I mean, his brother Foley was a 6th-round pick for us, and I mean, look, he ended up getting a $10 million contract, after playing 4 years in the league. So, comes from good bloodline, NFL bloodlines there, and guys that can really contribute and become really solid NFL caliber players, even being drafted in the 6th, 7th round. So there you go. That is my list of wide receivers and linebackers that I really like as prospects in the draft. We'll see what happens. See if we snatch up any of these guys, or which ones we snatch up when the draft rolls around in a couple days. If you like the content, as always, you know what to do, and I'll see you next time. Peace.